Welcome to Let's Unpack That. It's a podcast where we two college graduates analyze books that we read in middle school from literary and socio-political perspectives. I have that thing memorized, but when do we stop calling ourselves college graduates? It's been almost 2 years now. I'm Lydia.
When we pay off the damn student loans. And I'm tired. Just kidding. My name is Nina. Hi, guys. No, that's a great question, and I will always consider myself a college graduate because I, in fact, graduated college, and because I'm still giving that college money. So, yeah, I get to carry around that title for a bit. Thanks.
You know, I still haven't gotten my diploma.
You still haven't gotten your diploma?
Yeah.
What?
I need to contact them.
Yeah, okay, hang on. How has it been almost 2 years, and you are just now mentioning to anybody that you have not yet received your diploma, the most expensive piece of paper you will ever buy?
I don't know. In the last year, I moved a lot, and I never felt like I could give them a solid mailing address.
You do know your parents have lived in the same home for 20 years.
Yes, more like 25, but I don't know. I also am reluctant to hang things on my walls. I need to actually hang things on my walls. We've talked about this before, how blank my walls are. Like, I need to get some friggin' art.
That's a work of art. You know, the diploma itself is a work of art. It's the most expensive piece of wall hanging you will ever have in your room, on your walls, in your house. You should hang that shit. And get the pretty frame that has the little Pepperdine insignia on it, like I have. I love that thing.
Oh, man. Were you working at the bookstore when we sold those frames?
I don't think I was anymore.
Okay, the thing is, those things are so frickin' fragile, and, like, all of them came broken, and we couldn't sell them.
Oh, no. The ones with, like, the little insignia, or are you talking about the ones that have, like, the picture of the campus on it? Or all of the above?
All of them. Any ones with, like, the gold trims, they were misaligned, or just the corners didn't meet up right, or something was dented,
God.
or, I mean, they were barely packaged in cardboard, but
I'm gonna go look at mine very closely.
Yeah, I know how bad those frames are.
Oh, dear.
So I would get my own, but,
yeah,
you know, still hanging on.
You could, like, have somebody carve Pepperdine University in there. That might be kind of cool.
Yeah, do we know a wood carver? Somebody make me a custom frame for my currently non-existent diploma.
I have a boyfriend who's a welder. I don't know. I could throw him under the bus. I've been throwing projects at that poor guy for so many weeks now. He made me this really cool little statue for my birthday. I love it. And I showed it to some of my coworkers at the tack store. And one of my other coworkers pulls out a picture of a wine rack that's made of horseshoes. And she goes, "Oh, can he do this for me?" And I was like, I mean, yeah, I can ask him if he'd be into that. That'd be cool. And so I sent him a picture and I was like, "Hey, my coworker wanted to know if you could do this." And he goes, "Oh yeah, that'd be easy." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, she would pay you for it." And he's like, "Yeah, why not? What the hell?" Like, and he goes and buys like $5 worth of horseshoes from Big R or whatever, welds it together, takes him a little bit of time and, sells it to her. And then as I'm bringing it in, she's like, "Great, I want 2 more." And then another coworker saw the one that I brought in and she goes, "Oh my God, I do wine tastings. Can I have one?" And I'm like,
it looks like you've just boosted his business.
I guess. I mean, I feel kind of bad about it, but I also let him know, listen, you're dating a horsewoman. You're going to need income. I'm sorry.
Might as well stock up on bulk horseshoes.
Yeah. Well, and I feel kind of bad, but I mean, hey. So, long story short, I could throw him under the bus yet again and see if he wants to do anything. I'm totally kidding, Anthony. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll just have a horseshoe frame for my diploma.
Well, I don't know.
I know he can make other things.
I'm going to stop talking.
Okay.
I will stop talking now. Sorry. Speaking of college and student loans and all of that, I am seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. It's a lot less scary to think about your student loan debt when you look at the individual loans themselves and see what they're broken down into. Because I have a couple that are pretty hefty, but a couple of them are relatively small that I could probably pay off in a year if I, not a year each, if not less.
Like, how would you do that?
Like, I mean, I would take the smaller one and put more money towards that one.
Oh.
and get that one paid off faster. And then any money that I was putting towards that one, I would start putting towards the next smallest one. It's called the snowball effect, essentially paying off that debt and then using any of that money you were paying off on that debt you use to pay off the next debt. So gradually you build more and more money that you can chuck at this debt. So yeah, maybe potentially there's a light at the end of the tunnel and getting that all paid off if I start small and do what I can to get it paid off. So I don't know, man. Maybe I'll be debt free someday. Ha!
It'll happen.
It'll happen.
It'll happen.
I was gonna say, you know who's not debt free but is probably gonna die soon? Katniss!
All of us. Oh, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thought you were talking about Gen Z.
Are you
no
Gen
debt,
Z
but
or are you a
climate
millennial?
change. I am technically a millennial because 96 is the cutoff year according to the Pew Research Center.
I throw my brother so much shit because he's technically Gen Z. Katniss would be generation A375 or something like that. I don't know. This is sometime in
Generation
the future.
12.
Hey, dun-dun-sh. In any case, she is debt-free and she's probably about to die. This is The Hunger Games, chapters 9 and 10. If you've been following along, we are now getting closer to the start of the 74th Hunger Games. And chapter 9 opens pretty much after a bombshell dropped by Mr. Peter Bread Mellark.
No, it ends with the bombshell. Oh, wait, yeah, it does begin with a bombshell and ends with another one. Jeez.
Yes, we have the just bombs dropping, you know?
What is this, District 13?
In any case, Katniss deals with her conflicting emotions about Peeta deciding he wanted to be coached separately from her and writes it off as a smart decision on his part. She decides that it's probably because she scored so highly in her training. And also reminds herself that trust breeds weakness. She's essentially saying, okay, well, he realizes he's in danger because I scored so high. Effie and Haymitch then work on Katniss's images for her first interview with Caesar Flickerman, and the last time the audience of Panem will have a chance to, quote, know who the girl on fire is. Katniss also struggles with working on her image and doesn't quite understand why she needs to pretend for an audience, but finds comfort in her stylist Cinna, who tells her to look at him and consider him a friend while she's speaking and telling her story, which is a good way for her to cope and essentially be as open as she can with the audience, which is what she needs to be doing. So the tributes all have their interviews, and Katniss believes she does really well. She's feeling good until Peeta drops the bombshell. He reveals that he, in fact, has a crush on the girl that came with him from District 12. Ooh, the drama.
Yes, the drama. There's so much to talk about here.
Oh, God.
Like, you'll see later, when we talk about Chapter 10, I have, like, an entire page and a half of stuff. So, not dissimilar to you talking about everything else. Your page-long notes of blue text. Yes. But,
yeah.
This was...
I think this is also where we go from part 1 to part 2 in the book.
Yeah.
So,
I forgot about that.
Attitude of the book changes here. Like, this is it. This is where it changes. The thing that I really... this is what kind of grabbed me this week, was that Katniss and Peeta are in a situation that I think is incomprehensible for us.
Oh, definitely.
You know, she says trust is only a weakness. And, you know, generally we would write that off as being like, oh no, trust isn't a weakness. But in this situation, it genuinely is a weakness, because that person that you are putting your trust in is also going to be going into the arena with you and wants to kill you. And what really fascinated me here was that in war, you generally don't know or spend time with your enemy before the shooting begins. You know, you have psychological aspects of siding with your enemy, such as Stockholm Syndrome or something like that. But in this situation, Katniss and Peeta are expected to murder each other in a matter of hours. And there's no way you can deal with that. Like, how can you deal with this? You know, as human beings, we have been, for example, slaughtering animals for food, resources, and other supplies our entire existence, right? But even then, there's a disconnect between the killing of an animal versus killing a human. And you hear it all the time. I'm going to throw in my true crime fanatic here, but you'll find that people who have committed such heinous crimes and are doing it on a level of, you know, being a serial killer. I'm very, very highly overgeneralizing here, but you see a recurring pattern of just sociopathy and just a lack of emotion and compassion. And that's where you see people being able to commit these crimes over and over and over again. It's a genuine turn off of that emotion or of that lack of that empathy that people have. So, and that's just a recurring theme in serial killers. But these are two children, assuming what we know about Katniss and Peeta, assuming that they're not sociopaths. They have empathy, they feel, and they know what is about to happen. And on top of that, they're looking at each other knowing that the person across the table from them is going to try to kill them. You know, psychologically, we really don't know how that would affect a person. You know, I tried Googling something that would kind of narrow down what I was looking for. A couple of examples I was thinking was, okay, maybe holding a prisoner hostage before their execution. The example that I really kind of dove into was the Civil War and the fact that families were actually divided politically and on the battlefield. And it's actually likely that families and family members and friends witnessed, carried out each other's murder, but they weren't really spending time together at the same dinner table at that time, sleeping in the same penthouse and coming across as a team to the public. So even then, it's tough. It's hard. And then with the prisoner and guard situation, there's still a degree of separation there where one is in a power role. You see it with the Stanford prison experiment. There is the power complex of the person who is in charge of the situation versus the person who is being kept captive. It just doesn't line up the same way this would. There's no way to psychologically break this down and really have a better idea of how this would work. It's interesting. And I was looking through the Civil War, seeing, what I could find about that kind of psychology. And howstuffworks.com gave me a little bit of insight about brothers against brothers, as people often quoted during the Civil War. And this one quote I really liked: exploring why two brothers would fight on opposite sides of the Civil War is no easy task. It's difficult not to overestimate their motives. This is especially true when the division as a family seems to reflect the divisions of an entire country, as the family appears to do. It's important to remember that the motives behind the Civil War, like the people involved in it, were complex and multi-layered. It's easy to stray into generalizations, claiming one represented a drunken and rebellious South and the other stood for the staid and cosmopolitan North. But neither of these interpretations accurately represents either side or either man. And this is pulling from an article speaking about two brothers who are actually fighting on different sides of the Civil War against each other. Even that is not even close to what we're looking for, but I think it also touches on the fact that this is a very complex thing. There's no way we would be able to really break this down psychologically, nor would I want us to have the opportunity to do so. But the psychology of it was really what I was toying with. I really wanted to see if there was anything I could find on that kind of state of being in that kind of situation. And there was nothing. So I can't come up with anything else similar to what Peeta and Katniss are experiencing. But can you, Liz?
Actually, as you were talking about that just now, it kind of reminded me of that one scene in Kingsman. That one ridiculous spy movie that we went to see as a house our freshman year of college, where they spend all this time with a puppy and then they have to shoot the puppy. And it's kind of...
What movie is this? I don't think I went to see it.
I swear you did. It was like a parody of a spy movie.
Someone shooting a puppy. Okay.
Well, I mean, there wasn't actually a bullet in the gun, but it was the fact that you had to spend all this time with this animal and care for it and love it and give it everything it needs, and then you have to be prepared to turn against it. And that kind of reminded me of Katniss thinking, like, trust is weak, love is weak. She can't get close to Peeta because she's just gonna have to shoot him like a puppy. I don't want to talk about shooting puppies anymore.
Yes, please move on.
That was a weird movie. But I went for a less violent example because I don't think that we as people and as like young people know enough about war to analyze the psychology of war. Like, we've talked about why soldiers are able to kill and the tactics that they use to rationalize that in their heads so that they're able to carry on with life after taking someone else's life.
Supposedly.
Yeah.
All the PTSD and
yeah,
that come afterwards. But anyway, yes.
Yeah, some of them are able to continue on, and some are not. So we've talked about how intensely killing affects the human mind, but I came up with an example that wasn't about war or violence, but more that's a lot more silent and a lot more implicit. I thought about those stories that people have about really bad family dinners with really conservative family members who basically, they're going to vote for your death. And you know that they would, in a second, in a heartbeat, vote to strip away your specific human rights. I fortunately have never had this experience. I know there are a lot of Trump supporters in my family, but we don't talk about that. We don't talk about politics at the dinner table. And thank goodness, because then I would have to find out exactly why all these people voted for Trump when my sister and I are half Mexican, and there's just a contradiction there that I can't get over, but I also don't want to discuss with them.
Within good reason.
Yeah. But not everybody is as lucky, and not everybody is as secure in their situation with their family that they don't have to listen to people rail about how gay people should be executed or Mexicans should be executed. But every person who is made to feel unsafe at the dinner table and who knows that, well, we're a family, but you would vote for my death. And I think that nowadays is as close as we can come to how exactly it feels to be at the dinner table with an enemy. Because oftentimes when somebody is going to vote for your death and for the stripping away of your rights, it feels like they are the enemy. It is being an enemy. And although they aren't going to physically hack away at you with a machete or shoot you with a bow and arrow, the political systems can sometimes kill you in more brutal and more painful ways, or they make life hurt. And I know that, I'm saying all of this from a place of high privilege. I've never been made to feel unsafe at a dinner table. But I know that there are a lot of people who, especially in this recent holiday season, who have been made to feel unsafe and have hopefully been able to leave, but can't always leave that situation.
To play devil's advocate, though, could we argue that in the support of the political arena anyway, it comes from a place of ignorance, as in it could never happen to my family, or, oh, I'm only talking about the bad people? Because I remember reading an article a couple years ago, actually, about this man who said, oh, he voted for Trump and then his wife got deported because she was not a legal citizen. And he was like, well, I thought they were only going after the bad Mexicans. I think was an actual quote from the article. So could you argue in that sense that they're not necessarily maliciously looking to end who you are, or, for the people who are maybe not out to their family, and if the family doesn't know that they are speaking ill about people who have different sexualities, knowing that someone that is at their table is, part of the LGBT community, could we argue that's more of a place of ignorance rather than going into this knowing this person that I'm sitting next to, I want you to die? Obviously, it's not going to line up perfectly, but do you know what I mean?
I don't think that we can always say that, because there are people
we can always say that.
Right, but I think in this day and age, there's no excuse to be purposely ignorant. And a lot of people who vote in certain ways are purposely very close-minded and live in echo chambers of cognitive dissonance, and would very gleefully kick out their own family members if they didn't agree with their way of life, or if they didn't agree with them in a very specific, very, sexist, homophobic way. Ignorance is not innocence, and
absolutely not. Yeah.
We live in an age of information where if anybody wanted to learn more, if anybody wanted to inform themselves, they could. It's just that people don't bother to. And so I have no pity for those who don't bother to, and I have no pity for those who are at the dinner table spewing hate and just happen to get called out by someone who's like, wait, but I am part of that community. Do you hate me? You haven't made your racism or sexism or homophobia specific. You have made it general, and therefore the political is personal. And it's a privilege when you can consider that the political is not personal.
Amen. I mean, I completely agree with everything that you just said. That was beautiful. I completely agree.
So many
again,
impromptu speeches. I didn't write any of this down again.
No, you didn't, and it was fantastic. Wow. I know,
sure hope
and
so.
when
We'll
you
see
feel
in
like you
editing.
don't have to pay attention to these things, it's like you have to pay attention because likely someone that you love is affected by this. And it's hard. It's a hard thing to keep in mind, but also, I had to explain to someone again that the impeachment didn't mean he was being removed from office. It was essentially the charge to be removed from office. I felt kind of bad, but I have no the same way that you have no patience for ignorance, I don't either, especially when it comes to this thing, when it comes to just surrounding yourself by just one single opinion. So he's like, I just don't understand. It just seems like people were just generally upset and now he's impeached. I'm like, are you doing any research on your own or are you just listening to your army buddies?
Yeah, let me make that more clear though. It's okay to not know things as long as you're always willing to learn. What's not okay is thinking that you know everything and not being willing to learn anything else.
Or admit that you're wrong.
Right. And like the internet has taught us in a lot of ways that we can't admit to being wrong, that we must erase all evidence of ever having been wrong. But like, it's okay to be wrong. Like, if you'll believe it,
okay.
Once I was very homophobic. Like, people change. So it's okay to change your opinions when you learn more information. That is the definition of what it means to be a person with a brain.
Yeah, exactly.
So learn stuff.
Exactly.
Just be nice to people. Gosh.
Just fucking leave people alone, for the love of God. Drifting back to the topic of this actual podcast, we could always do a spin-off podcast and just do politics 24/7 if you were ever interested.
Hey,
that's something.
I've already offered you your true crime podcast.
I know, but what are we going to do?
If you want to do a true crime / politics.
Oh, man. Oh, I could talk. Oh, God, don't put that
I'm reeling her in, guys. I'm reeling her in.
She is, and I'm already thinking about what the first episode would be about. Deprivatization of jails. Anyway.
Only
fine.
one episode? Jeez.
Don't start.
Okay.
Reeling it back in, because that's exactly what I need, is to add another thing to my list of extracurricular hobbies and things that need to get accomplished. This is something that came up during the conversation too that I thought about. I mentioned previously that something that you see in serial killers is the sociopathy, right? This lack of empathy, this lack of emotion. And it kind of made me think, the career tributes, 1, 2, and 4, they have those training sessions, those training camps, essentially to breed killers. And they're in a way kind of bred to be sociopathic in that way. I think at the end of the first movie, The Hunger Games, Cato almost begs for death. He says, I only know how to kill. That's the only thing I know how to do. They've removed that emotion from those children, which is why they're so successful. And heck, I'd kind of like to know more about what those kids go through when they enter into those kind of training regiments, because there has to be a level of really removing yourself from emotion the way that a killer would. And I'm sure it's horrific, but I think that'd be an interesting thing to look into. If there was more information somewhere out there in the world, what exactly do those trainings look like? What do they do to those kids that really allow them to be such cold-blooded killers?
Yeah, they definitely train them to not value their fellow tributes' lives. And I think at the end of the movie, especially because we can see the emotion on Cato's face, we see that break. We see him break out of that and realize, oh God, there is more to life than this. And now I just want to die. And that's a brutal realization. If you've been socialized just one way and just to think about other people in one way, and then you find out in the middle of the worst weeks of your life that you're probably going to die, that all of that was a lie, shit.
No biggie.
It's fucked up.
Yeah. Speaking of sociopaths, let's talk about politicians.
Woo woo.
Well, not necessarily politicians, but being a public figure. Something that also caught my eye the second time this is like the millionth time I've read this book, but now that I've really had an age between me and the last time I read it, and I've learned things, and I'm grayed with knowledge.
No, I was there when you started finding gray hairs, I remember.
Oh, yes. And they are multiplying. And my hair is longer now, so they're more noticeable. It's horrifying. But sociopaths, public figures. While this is all going on and we're discussing the psychology behind killing the person who's across the table from you, Katniss is also learning to be a public figure. And this caught my eye because you never really thought about it or at least I didn't really think about it when I was first reading these books and thinking like, oh yeah, Katniss is totally in the right. She shouldn't have to, put on a show, and she's so badass and going against the crowd and da-da-da-da. But really, I think this is a major weakness of Katniss's that we could dissect a bit further. I'm speaking about when she is in her training sessions with Haymitch and Effie and essentially learning to be a public figure. A lot goes into a public image, and the Hunger Games before they actually entered the arena definitely highlights this. So Katniss, on top of being introduced as the girl on fire, now has to work to walk and hold herself in a certain way. Etiquette in a pre-apocalyptic world and an upside-down world. So there's kind of an irony to it that even though the whole world is shit, she still has to wear a dress and act like a lady. But she also has to go through trainings such as nonverbal communication. I was looking at psychology today and looked at body language because we do spend a fair amount of this if you're doing any kind of learning about interview prep or public speaking, if you've taken debate or if you're, prepping for an interview, the way you hold yourself and your body language, the way you communicate is very important. And this is also true for the public figure role, which is what we see here with Effie trying to teach Katniss how to walk in the dress and hold herself in a certain way and sit and smile. Psychology Today had a great quote that said, "We also have a parallel track of nonverbal communication alongside our verbal communication, and that may reveal more than our carefully chosen words and sometimes be at odds with them. If not, most of the nonverbal signaling and reading of signals is automatic and performed outside of our conscious awareness and control. Through our nonverbal cues, we unwittingly communicate a great deal of information about ourselves and our state of mind. The gestures we make, the position in which we hold our bodies, and the expressions we wear on our faces, and the nonverbal qualities of our speech all contribute to how others view us. Crossing your arms, slouching, frowning, smiling, emotional or not emotional. You see this all the time with female politicians. They're torn apart. When I was taking my women in politics class in college, we had a couple of different categories that women politicians would often fall into. It's either an iron lady or too emotional or too sexy or like a mother figure. Politics are seen as a masculine role themselves, so women have to be judged accordingly and are either too masculine, too feminine, too provocative, too frumpy, too overbearing, or too soft. It goes on and on and on, trying to find that balance. What I mean to say is that you will be, whenever you are placed in a position of having any kind of public appearance where people will be watching, you're going to be judged on everything, including how you hold yourself. And this is what Effie is trying to play on for Katniss's role and trying to teach her how to walk in heels and be in a dress and say, this is important. So
and that explains why Katniss feels like she can't do anything right. Like she's always messing up. She can't walk in the heels. She can't be the person that they want her to be because she's barely a person.
Oh, it sucks. It's disgusting. And it's definitely more so something that Katniss is experiencing, again, with the girl on fire and then being this desired object of PETA. More on that later.
Like she is a brand.
She is a brand. Before I get too far into this political feminism rant, I also want to just kind of roll that back and add that I'm not trying to say that Katniss was wrong with the situation that she's in, as always, is incomprehensible. But Katniss sucks at the politics part of the Hunger Games. She just does. There's one thing on being a good fighter. The other half of this whole shebang is the political side of it. It's inherently political. And she fights with Haymitch about this on her image. She even says, all I can think about is how unjust the whole thing is. The Hunger Games. Why am I hopping around like a trained dog trying to please people I hate? Of course it's unjust. And because the reason you're hopping around like a trained dog is because you are trying to survive, Katniss, honey. Winning the games here is 1 part survival and 2 part politics. And as someone who has spent their whole lives watching these games, Katniss should know this. Obviously, she needs to be strong and cunning to survive the physical aspect of the game. She can't be a weakling. She can't keel over and die after 2 days of no food. But a politician doesn't get votes just by having the right strength to play the game. The politicians who win have huge campaign balances, have money, have their faces plastered on ads and all over social media, and they're selling themselves in a way that identifies to people. They all have their audience base that they're trying to reach. And this is very similar to how tributes have to have sponsors to gain advantages in the arena. They have to have the people that they appeal to, because the difference between survival and death could be a sponsor deciding, hey, I like that person, I like what they're about, I'm going to send them soup because they're starving and close to death. I want to see them continue. It's cut from the same cloth, same political cloth there. And maybe I'm being a little bit harsh, but it almost seems too unrealistic for Katniss to be this oblivious to the political part of the games. From day one, she's been looking at it like, I can't cry, I have to be strong and really be a part of this, show myself as a strong competitor. But that's also inherently being political too, and saying like, I have to put up this image for herself. I don't know. To me, the fact that she is so fighting against it, pulling against the bit, and does not seem to realize the point of all of this almost seems kind of unrealistic, because she has grown up watching the games. She knows what this is about. Why wouldn't she try to do more to fix her image? I don't know.
It could suggest, though, that she hasn't really been watching. I mean, that would make sense, because nobody wants to see that. They're mandated to see it, but are they mandated to absorb it? No. Like how we see Gale in the movie, he's out in a field when Katniss is just entering the arena. It's possible that she did that every year. She didn't watch the games like she was mandated. She just went out into the woods with Gale and paid the least attention to what was going on as she could, because that was how she coped as a child, watching other children die.
I see your point there, but she also has information. She recalls details from games from years ago. Mm-hmm. So like she does retain this. She does watch it, and she does know what's going on. The way that she knows so much about some things and then so little about others, like this political piece, I don't know. I think she's required to watch, and she must know, shouldn't she?
All of this stuff that she's newly encountering is behind the scenes. Like, she watched the interviews of other tributes with Caesar Flickerman, but she didn't see their training sessions. She didn't see how they got to those interviews and to being who they were in those interviews. She's seeing all that behind the scenes stuff for the first time.
I hear what you're saying. To me, it just seems like Collins is really playing into I'm different and rebellious. TM part
kind of like,
Katniss.
What did you expect this to be?
Yeah, like I'm gonna go against the grain because I'm Katniss Everdeen and I will. It almost
did you
seems
expect
like
that you could do that?
It just feels like an exaggeration of her character. You know, it just feels, I don't want to say forced, but I think over exaggeration is the right word I'm looking for here. It just feels like too much.
Okay, I can understand that.
Yeah. Also, the exchange between Katniss and Cinna later on in this chapter, this phrase did not age well. Let's say. He tells her to answer the questions as honestly as possible. And she says, well, do I answer even if what I think is horrible? And Cinna goes, yes, especially if what you think is horrible. I don't know about you, but that kind of reminds me of how we got into the Trump era, saying the outrageous things or the dividing things, the divisive things, the challenging things to get people's attention. Trump won because he said things that caught people's attention because he wasn't a, quote, a true politician. None of what he said was remotely smart or true or even intelligent, but fuck, man, look where we are now. And then maybe I'm overreading into it, but that exchange of say what you think, especially if what you think is horrible, it sent an uncomfortable feeling down my spine. God.
That makes sense. I mean, I read it more as say it even if you know that it's not what they want to hear about themselves, even if it's what they need to hear, but they don't want to pay attention to. He's not telling her to say, like, everybody in the Capitol is an idiot and y'all are fuckheads. He's telling her to say, I'm struggling here and it's your fault.
Yeah. And I agree. I could definitely be reading too much into it. But when I read that, I hearkened back to everything you heard about, like, oh, he's different, TM. And it was not a pleasant,
I understand, because it's like he's telling her to be the opposite of politically correct. And it kind of reminds me also of how now we have all these comedians making jokes about, oh, you can't make any jokes anymore because nothing's politically correct. And then saying awful stuff because they think it's funny. Like, but it's possible to say what you think is horrible without being mean to people and without being unjustifiably awful.
Yeah.
So that's how I interpreted it, but I understand where you're coming from with that.
It's probably my background. And honestly, I'm comparing the tributes to politicians right now. I really am.
Yeah.
They're unwitting politicians, but they are people with an agenda who are trying to gain supporters and trying to win at a game.
Mm-hmm.
That's a politician. And it just feels like an over-exaggeration to me that Katniss is just not picking up on it.
I don't know exactly what is going on here, because on one end, yes, she's failing to pick up on that, but on the other end, nobody is being clear with her about what is expected of her, when, and especially why. So I guess a big question that I had in this chapter was, are Haymitch and Katniss just not communicating? Or is she not getting into her head that she needs to be a certain way? And every time something goes wrong and she inevitably gets yelled at, it feels like something wrong happened in the communication, like she wasn't given some vital piece of information, and if she had just been told this is what's going on and this is why, then they wouldn't have to have a yelling match about it later.
I hear what you're saying. I think you could also argue that her whole persona the entire time she's been in the district is, I've got this. They don't feel the need to explain it to her. And then you could also pull back in again the fact that she's been watching the Hunger Games her entire life. It should, quote, should be rather obvious. You know, is that I'm putting that out there, like, does it need to be explained? Like, you're trying to get people to like you to give you food.
I think so, yes. Because this type of being a public figure is very different from being a regular person and having like 200 followers on Instagram. I understand what you're saying about her persona being like, I got this, but everybody else knows she doesn't got this. And by this point, I would have thought that the number of times that she's messed up would make them explain, like sit her down and say, hey, this is what's going on and why. I know that being a persona is very different. It's not an obvious way to be. And we see that even nowadays with what people do with their newfound viral fame. And actually, there's a book about this that I've probably been telling you to read. I think you read it, An Absolutely Remarkable Thing.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
Yes.
That whole thing is about that. And like somebody can become so brutal and so incredibly good and so incredibly bad because of overnight fame. And in its essence, that's what has happened to her.
Yeah. Yeah. But she does also have a sense of, I fucked up. It's not like she's just blindly going through it. Like after she shot the arrow at the gamekeepers, she goes, oh, fuck, now they're going to kill my family and I'm screwed and I'm going to be killed the moment I step foot in the arena. There's common sense to, you know, she sees that A plus B will equal C, you know, whatever. She sees that line of reasoning. So I'm just not convinced that she could so clearly just be oblivious to that half of the room. I just visualized how there's a SpongeBob episode where they're talking about like, I'm going to the dark side and, you know, it's whatever. And like literally half of the Krusty Krab restaurant is just black. And Mr. Krabs goes, why pay for electricity in the whole building? But I don't know why that image came to mind here. The sense was like she's seeing so much of this side. She has a full, clear picture of this side, but the other half of the restaurant is just black. Mm-hmm. She's in the dark side. She doesn't know what's going on.
Yes, Katniss is in the Krusty Krab.
And she is in the dark.
Yeah. It's like she is constantly oscillating between I got this and oh man, I fucked up. But at the same time, like her mentors are not. They know what's going on. Yeah. And that's what leads me to think that they're not telling her the whole plan. Mm-hmm. And I think we'll talk about this more with next chapter. But the point is, like, if they haven't been clear about what they want her to do and why, then at no point have they said, here's the image of you we're working on. Do you consent to it? And in that way, we come back to autonomy. It's like, what do you expect of her? She's a child. Do you expect her to be instantly famous and fluent at it? Like, you can't expect that. And yet they do expect that because she's going to have to fight for her life and she better buck up. Also, I think part of it is because Haymitch is an alcoholic and he's not thinking clearly.
End scene.
Yeah, and that's chapter 9, folks.
Oh my God.
Pretty intense stuff.
Yeah.
It's
I
only
mean,
downhill from here.
you know, we always seem to jump so much into the first chapter we're doing.
Yeah.
Maybe one of these days we need to switch it around and be like, okay, here's everything we're going to talk about in chapter 12, and then we'll backtrack to chapter 11. Or I don't know.
I mean, we always have more to talk about with the first chapter, and we end up talking about more stuff. But chapter 10 is the chapter where I have the whole 2 pages of notes. So
Yeah, I'm
let's get
excited.
into it.
Let's get this bread.
All right. Shall I read the summary or shall you?
You shall, because you wrote it.
Okay,
I didn't feel
cool.
like typing the summary for this one.
All right. So chapter 10, the audience is soaking in this new information about Peeta's eternal crush on Katniss. And Katniss can only sit there and she's fucking stunned. She notices that the cameras
Shooketh.
can see her and she's blushing and she's trying to look down and hide it. And she just feels so awkward and shooketh indeed. And so on the way back to the training center, she avoids Peeta. She gets into a different car. But when they get back to their penthouse, she shoves him. She knocks over a vase and he cuts his hand on the shards. And she is pissed at him that he pulled that little stunt and made her look weak in front of everyone. Haymitch then explains that actually he made her look desirable and this tactic will actually help her in the games. And now they can use the tactic of being star-crossed lovers. At this point, even Cinna says that Haymitch is right. And that's what finally starts to convince Katniss that maybe this was a good idea and Peeta did her a favor. And she starts to doubt herself and be sorry that she pushed him. And then later that evening, they say goodbye to Effie and Haymitch for the last time. And Effie's actually quite emotional. Katniss is too anxious to sleep, so she goes to the roof and finds Peeta there looking out at the city. He does his whole speech about wanting to die as himself and not just being a piece in their games, ironically. And then the next morning, they take the journey to the arena. She boards the hovercraft with Cinna and gets her tracker inserted into her arm. And we learn that, weirdly, every single arena is brand new, and the old ones are preserved as historical sites that the capital people like to tour. So Katniss gets dressed in her arena outfit, Cinna gives her her Mockingjay pin, and then they say goodbye, and she gets in the glass cylinder that lifts her into the bright light of the arena.
Screaming.
Oh, same. I hate this. I hate this so much. Okay.
Oh, man.
Just the irony of Peeta being like, I want to be myself, and like not letting her be herself. We've talked about this before. I hate it so much. It's like, Peeta.
This was either
Stop.
chapter 1 or chapter 2. This was either episode 1 or 2, but I completely agree. It's so problematic of Peeta be claiming his love for Katniss.
And she's so right to be pissed at him.
She's
and to
right to be
push
pissed.
him. And everybody just starts gaslighting her right away and being like, actually, this was a good thing to do. He did a good thing for you. He's going to give you an advantage.
Yay.
Like, then why didn't you tell me?
Oh, he's pinching you because he likes you, sweetie. You have to be nice to him. It's okay that he's pushing you into the dirt. It's just because he doesn't know how to fuck off.
Yeah, he's going to try to help you survive, bitch. So be grateful that he's objectifying you in front of all these audiences.
Be grateful
it's going to give you an advantage.
You. It's like the 70s when we had peeping Toms and stalkers, and they're like, well, why are you pushing this guy away? Why didn't you... Whatever.
No, it's okay
Let's
because he just wants to help.
I love it. It's great.
Ugh.
Let's go back to that previous episode. I went back and pulled my notes from episode 3. We talked about feminism and autonomy, and I had a beautiful piece ready, and I want to requote our queen, Megan Ann Peters of Minnesota State University. If you may remember, she wrote a gorgeous thesis, and I'm going to just be like Jonathan Van Ness for a minute. Gorgeous, honey. Gorgeous. And I just thought that I would reiterate pretty much everything I'm about to say is like a direct quote from her thesis. If you can go and read it, I highly recommend it. It's great. But the objective of her thesis here, and I'll just read this. This is a direct quote. The objective of this thesis is to complicate the popular reading of the Hunger Games trilogy as pro-feminist by demonstrating that the novels depict ambiguous and contradictory images of capitalism and sexualization. So the part that I'm pulling from here when it came to this paper is that during the pre-game interviews with the Capitol, Peeta declares his love for Katniss in front of both the studio and national audiences as the Hunger Games are mandatory viewing. Katniss was not informed of this public announcement ahead of time, nor did she know that Peeta had a romantic interest in her, so she's upset, reasonably, and expresses her anger over Peeta's announcement, claiming that he made her look weak and like a fool, and her concerns are not taken seriously. He made you look desirable, and let's face it, you can use all the help you can get in that department. Page 135. Because it is Katniss's mentor, Haymitch, and stylist Cinna encouraging her to be grateful for the advantage she gets via desirability, she is compelled to accept her sexualization, which is noted as a subtle coercion, according to the sociologist Edwin Scher, exists whenever an individual feels pressured into undesired sexual activity. Actually, and I'm breaking away from this here, so this is my thinking, not a direct quote, but it's also kind of in the business world or like in careers or Hollywood, sleeping with the boss to get ahead. Like, oh, you have to do what you have to do to survive. It's along that same lines of disgustingness. It's ugh. The way that Miss Peters is discussing it here is she is likening it to sexual objectification theory. And she notes that objectification theory was the idea that the common thread running through all forms of sexual objectification is the experience of being treated as a body or a collection of body parts, valued predominantly for its use or consumption by others. So they argue that objectification functions to socialize females to treat themselves as objects to be looked at and evaluated. And objectification takes the form of the gaze, which is enacted through various social encounters and media representations, the way Katniss is being represented here. And the idea being constantly on display leads girls and women to actively monitor their bodies, interfering with their thoughts and actions, and serves to inhibit their ability to enjoy life freely, all of which Katniss is currently experiencing. And again, I am almost directly quoting from this thesis here. I am not claiming to have any kind of this literary prowess because this is beautiful. I think I just want to read this entire thesis out loud. Thank you. The main point being that the main problem with this arrangement is not that Katniss and Peeta are forced into a relationship, since this is clearly being portrayed as undesirable, right? So Collins is clearly portraying this as undesirable. But the problem, Peters would argue, is that the non-consensual aspects of the relationship are incorporated with the consensual aspects to create a feeling of real love, quote, at the base of it all. It appears that because Katniss really does care about Peeta and because Peeta truly loves Katniss, it is, quote, not so bad that their relationship is coerced.
Oh.
So because at some level Katniss loves Peeta, their arranged relationship seems like, quote, the right thing to do. Other people know better than Katniss what she wants, needs, and desires. Imagine that. Someone telling a woman how to feel, what to want, and what to desire, and what she needs. Wow. This line of reasoning is seeped in misogyny, disempowers women, and neutralizes women's agency. With other characters being cast as knowing what's best, quote, for Katniss, it serves to excuse their control over her. Without the right to choose for herself whether to engage in a romantic relationship, regardless of personal desires, Katniss lacks authority over her body and her life. This is all pulling from page 46 of her thesis again. Something that is also noted that Katniss herself thinks, okay, I'm torn between thinking I've been used and thinking that I've been given an edge. What was I really? A silly girl spinning in a sparkling dress, giggling. I'm forgettable. And later on, she even says, he has done me a favor and I've answered with an injury. Will I ever stop owing him? This combined with, I think, everything that Peters just said, oh my God. And of course, you're never going to pick up on this when you're 13. But dang, there's so many ways that this could have affected young girls and boys into thinking this is okay. This is okay to be like, oh, I'm saving your life because I'm going to force my affections on you, or I'm making your life better because I'm forcing your affections on you. It really sets a precedent of, I can't even think of the word for it. It's a dangerous precedent for thinking that you have to be grateful for someone using you in a way that you have not consented to because they are claiming that it's for your greater good. It's kind of a blend of Stockholm syndrome, victim blaming, the whole phrase of he did it because I deserve it and I should be thankful that he did it.
Yeah, it's definitely gaslighting, like telling her that actually what you think is not true and this is actually good because it's good for you. Kind of similar to Edward knowing better than Bella and being like, well, he can be like this because he's old and he knows better.
He knows things because he has a dick.
Yeah, and because he's lived for over 100 years and because he's a fancy vampire who can read minds and because he saved my life. In this situation, she's definitely being gaslit, which I think is unfair for a lot of reasons, and it's on the adults. Like, she is a child, she is 16, there are adults in this room who have deliberately failed to communicate with her. Haymitch and Effie have done nothing but tell Katniss that Peeta's doing things right, and she needs to be a certain way, she needs to be desirable. They could have tried a different tactic, but no, because Peeta likes her, she's forced into this one. Also, it's notable here that Cinna sides with Haymitch and Peeta. Before, he's been on Katniss's side, and Katniss has trusted him with being on her side. But now he's teaming up with the others, telling her that she's wrong to feel hurt. And no one in this scene is telling her that it's all right to be angry about being manipulated. They just keep telling her that actually her being manipulated was a good thing. Which leads me to the irony of Peeta's speech on the roof, which we talked about a little bit earlier in a previous episode. But he doesn't want to be just a piece in the games. And yet, he's made Katniss a piece in the game. Arguably to keep her safe. But at what point does this not become justifiable? Is there any situation in which it's okay to manipulate someone or to manipulate others' perceptions of them if it's for their own good? It's similar to, like, when is lying good? Is it morally okay to lie to someone for their own good, or is lying always wrong? And this is where I did some research. Do you want to say something before that?
No, lay it on me. I'm so ready for this.
Okay. So I found this article on Stanford's website called The Ethics of Manipulation by Robert Noggle. It's from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. It'll be linked in the description below. And it starts with an example situation and a list of ways that one person might try to manipulate another into doing a certain thing instead of the thing they've said they want to do. And several of these directly apply to Katniss' situation. And for this, I've inserted her name into the example slot. 1. Make Katniss feel guilty for pursuing X instead of Y. Quote, I should be thankful for what he's done. 2, point out that X will make Katniss feel less worthy and appealing to her friends, or in this case, the Capitol and their sponsors. 3, make Katniss doubt her own judgment when she says, I'm torn now between thinking I've been used and thinking I've been given an edge. And 4, guilt-tripping, gaslighting, and peer pressure, which are all obviously in play here. Now, the philosopher bitch Kant would argue that, like lying, manipulation is always wrong, because, yeah, Kant is a bitch. And even when not manipulating someone would lead to more people being put in danger, you still shouldn't do it. But we're not talking about more people being put in danger here. We're just talking about Katniss herself. They're manipulating Katniss to save Katniss, and only her. So what now? So according to this article, there are 3 basic arguments about manipulation. 1, that it's absolutely wrong, no matter what the circumstances. 2, that it's wrong except if the benefits outweigh the harm done. And 3, that it's okay but shouldn't be used as a first option. So now let's talk about autonomy. We've talked quite a bit about autonomy before, and I think this is the situation where we have to get really deep into it. So to quote the article, perhaps the most common account of the wrongfulness of manipulation claims that it violates, undermines, or is otherwise antithetical to the target's personal autonomy. However, there are reasons for caution about tying the moral status of manipulation too highly to its effects on autonomy. One can imagine cases where it is not obvious that manipulation undermines autonomy. One can even imagine cases where a manipulative act might enhance the target's overall autonomy. So here's the question. Do her trainers and mentors' manipulation of Katniss's decisions before the games enhance her autonomy later in the book and in the series? Yes, Peeta's love for her ensures that she doesn't get murdered by Snow after the games, and that they're both allowed to survive because of public pressure. And also that she is allowed a little more leeway in rebelling because people like her. So is the manipulation here immoral? And if so, in what way? I think, and this is just my personal opinion, other people might form their own personal opinions, I think it is immoral because of the third argument about manipulation, that it shouldn't be used as a first option. At so many points, Haymitch and Peeta could have explained things to Katniss before she got to the point of blowing up at them, or blowing up at the game makers, or blowing up at anybody. They could have told her about the plan for the interview before. And even though they might not have gotten as genuine of a reaction, at least she wouldn't feel like shit about it, and nobody would get hurt. Peeta wouldn't go into the games with the disadvantage of his hands. There are so many ways that this could have gone differently, and none of them are on Katniss. She is not the one in control here because she is being manipulated.
Never.
It's totally on the adults, and it's down to the adults not treating her like a human being.
Oh, man. That's... Let's unpack that. I'm trying to think of my answer about the question. So is the manipulation here immoral? And if so, in what way? I'm torn between the third argument saying that it's okay, but it shouldn't be used as a first option. But I'm also understanding here in terms of the second argument that you mentioned that it's wrong, except for if the benefits outweigh the harm done. The ends justifying the means to a certain extent is something that I have personally believed, obviously in very rare circumstances and not where anyone's going to get hurt. But that is something I believed. Okay, if we're trying to get this end thing done, here's what we need to do to get that done. But
right. And if the cost is her getting emotionally hurt in order for her to not get physically hurt, does that outweigh it?
She can be emotionally hurt when she goes back to District 12 and, has food for her family for the rest of her life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think I can choose between the two. It's wrong on so many levels because, we're seeing this just manipulation of her, this young girl. Think about it in that context, but then at the same time, wow, I'm going to need a Xanax.
Yeah, it is so complicated, especially since the situation that she's in is already so shitty. So do you make it a little bit shittier so that she ends up having a decent life? Or do you give her as much comfort that you can and help her out as much as you can without harming her any more than what the Capitol's going to do to her in the arena? Like, when do you spare someone the pain?
I don't know. I don't know. This is probably the wrong comparison to draw, but I'm kind of thinking of like when an animal is hurt and you're choosing between attempting to rehabilitate it or to end its life, what is gentler and what is kinder. It kind of feels like that decision.
Yeah, it's like tough love. Like, this will help you in the long run, so buck up and deal with it. But also that doesn't make it right, and that doesn't mean that she's wrong to feel hurt.
Yeah.
And they're making her feel wrong for feeling like she's hurt.
Exactly. Oh boy.
Life is complicated, folks.
Life is complicated, and especially when you're being put into an arena with 23 other kiddos and being told, okay, go kill each other. Here's a stick. You have a nice time. Bringing up the whole terrain of the games now, I was going to try and talk a little bit about wondering aloud what the games would have looked like if we were in another terrain, like the cold, barren wasteland that was suggested earlier, or like a shorefront that we saw in book 2. But, really, that all seems about pointless. I think, dang, I kind of want to sit and leave on that because the morality of this whole thing is just so, like you said, it's complicated. How can you justify that? But really, how can you not? Oh, yeah. Boy.
It's like we already know that the games are obviously wrong, but how do you make it less wrong?
How do you survive in this world that is wrong?
Yeah, how do you live a life that is wrong in the best way possible?
Yeah. So anyway, drinks. I was gonna say drinks in 10 minutes. See you there. Oh man.
I'm not gonna sleep tonight. It's fine.
I will sleep tonight, but
I know you will.
I always do. Anyway, well, that was cheerful. I don't have anything else to add after that. Do you want to add anything else, or?
We've talked a lot in this episode about real-world significance and comparisons to the real world. And we all know that we're living in a really shitty world. So I guess my question to the people listening is, how do you make the day better? How do you make it survivable? And how do you cope with living in a world that is troublesome and conflicted and awful knowing that you have to go on. I guess I don't want to end with hopelessness. I want to end with hope, because we have always continued on. Like, sometimes it takes us a while to get back up, but
yeah,
we're never completely beaten down. And I guess even when we're made to feel guilty for feeling bad about the world that we live in, or when we feel just so bad about everything that's happening that we're just exhausted with it, it's called compassion fatigue, that there is a way, and that I hope that everybody listening can find the kindness in everyday life and in your friends and in the people that you spend your days with.
Yeah.
And in the small things.
I agree. There's a reason why I tattooed the semicolon mark on my wrist. And that's because, there's always opportunities to stop at one point. But the whole beauty of life is being able to continue on and take what you've learned and be a stronger person and grow from it and just fight the good fight, So I agree. There's always hope. There's always going to be hope for turning this around, for turning your own circumstances around. There's always another day. And I agree. I like the idea of ending on hope rather than hopelessness, because it's definitely necessary. And I'm thinking of the scene at the end of Rogue One where they superimposed Carrie Fisher's face on an actress, and the character asks, "What do you have there?" And Carrie Fisher, as Princess Leia, turns around and she goes, "Hope."
Yeah, like we don't end with the planet exploding. We don't end with our heroes dying. We end with hope. Yeah. So that is all for us this episode. Wow.
That's cool. More drinks.
Yeah.
Get it off.
Yeah, to end with boilerplate, you can follow us on Twitter at Let's Unpack Pod, and actually tell us what you think about morality in this world and in our own world. Based on what we've said, I think we've given people plenty of food for thought. And so share what you think with us. We want to hear it. You can find us on SoundCloud, on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and also leave us a review and a rating there. That really helps us out. And we will see you in 2 weeks.
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Also, donate to Sarah Turney's campaign to get billboards up to help the investigation into the disappearance and likely murder of her sister, Alyssa Turney. And I think that's my little plug for the week, too. Have a good one, guys. Happy impeachment trial. And we'll see you on the other side of this bullshit. Yeah.
Let's get this bread.
Let's get this bread.